thought I was going crazy when I saw the eyes staring out from the back of people's heads. But when I tried to warn them, no one believed me. It started on a Monday morning during my usual commute to work. I was on the bus, staring blankly out the window, when I noticed something strange. The man sitting in front of me, his back turned to me, seemed off. I couldn't put my finger on it at first, but then I saw it, a pair of eyes staring back at me from the back of his head. I blinked, convinced I was seeing things. But when I looked again, they were still there. Two dark, hollow eyes, wide open, unblinking, locked onto mine. The man didn't seem to notice, didn't react, just sat there staring straight ahead as if nothing was wrong. Holy shit, I muttered under my breath, my heart pounding in my chest. I looked around expecting someone else to notice, but no one did. They were all just going about their morning routine, completely unaware of the horror right in front of them. I wanted to say something, to ask the man if he was okay. But what the hell would I even say? Hey dude, you've got a fucking pair of eyes growing out of the back of your head. I shook my head, trying to convince myself that he was trying to prank people or it was a weird reflection. Something, anything, other than what it appeared to be. But as the bus ride went on, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was horribly wrong. When the man finally got off the bus, I watched him walk away, the eyes on the back of his head still staring at me until he disappeared into the crowd. I felt a shiver run down my spine, a cold, sick feeling settling in the pit of my stomach. I tried to forget about it, to convince myself that it was just a one-time thing, but the next day, I saw it again. This time, it was a woman at the grocery store. She was standing in front of the dairy section, reaching for a carton of milk, when I saw them. The eyes, staring out from the back of her head, unblinking, locked onto mine. I froze, my heart racing, but the woman didn't seem to notice. She just grabbed her milk, turned, and walked away, the eyes disappearing as she did. Fuck, I whispered, my hands trembling. I tried to tell someone, one of the store employees, anyone, but they just looked at me like I was crazy, like I was making it up. I left the store in a daze, my mind racing, my hands shaking. What the hell was happening? Was I losing my mind? The sightings became more frequent after that. I saw the eyes everywhere, on the bus, in the park, at work. They were always the same, dark, hollow, unblinking, staring out from the back of people's heads, locked onto mine. And no one else seemed to notice. I tried telling my friends, but they didn't believe me. They said I was just tired, stressed out, that I needed to get some sleep. But I knew what I was seeing was real. I knew those eyes were out there, watching, always watching. One night, as I was walking home from work, I saw them again. This time, it was a man walking his dog, the eyes staring out from the back of his head, unblinking, following my every move. I felt a chill run down my spine, a cold, sick feeling settling in the pit of my stomach. "Hey!" I shouted, running toward him. "Hey, do you know—" But before I could finish, the man turned, his face twisted into a grotesque grin, the eyes on the back of his head disappearing as he did.
"Something wrong?"
he asked, his voice dripping with false concern. I stumbled back, my heart racing, my mind reeling. I thought I saw something," I stammered, my voice trembling. He took a step closer, his grin widening, his eyes, his real eyes, locked onto mine.
"You didn't see anything,"
he said, his voice low and menacing. I backed away, my hands shaking, my mind racing. Yeah, maybe I didn't," I muttered, turning to leave. As I walked away, I felt his eyes on me, following me, watching my every move. I didn't look back. I didn't want to see the eyes on the back of his head again. When I finally got home, I locked the door behind me, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew then that I wasn't crazy, that what I was seeing was real. The eyes were out there, following people, watching, always watching. But no one believed me. I stopped going out after that. I couldn't bear to see the eyes anymore, couldn't handle the way they stared at me, unblinking, hollow, always watching. I quit my job, Stopped seeing my friends. Just stayed home, locked in my apartment, hiding from the world. But even then, I wasn't safe. One night, as I was lying in bed, I felt a cold, creeping sensation in the back of my mind, like someone, or something, was watching me. I sat up, my heart pounding, my eyes darting around the room, but there was nothing there. Just the darkness, the silence, the suffocating weight of fear pressing down on me. And then I felt it, a presence behind me, a cold, dark presence that sent chills down my spine. Dread spilled through my veins like cold water. I sat up thinking. I knew what I had to do. As I walked to my bathroom, I was numb. I was forcing myself not to do anything past the next movement I was doing. I flicked on the harsh light and stared at my reflection, my hands resting on the bathroom sink. With a nod, I picked up the small mirror I had for shaving and began to angle it behind me. I turned slowly, my breath catching in my throat, and saw them. The eyes, staring out from the back of my own head, unblinking, hollow, locked onto mine in the mirror. I screamed, the sound echoing off the walls, but the eyes didn't move, didn't blink, just stared back at me, watching, always watching. I tried to run, but it was no use. The eyes were always there, always watching, always following me, no matter where I went, no matter what I did. They were a part of me now, a dark, twisted part that I couldn't escape, and no one believed me.
When my daughter started talking about the man in the corner, I thought it was just a child's imagination, until I saw it too. It started innocently enough. My daughter Aaliyah, barely 3 years old, began mentioning the man in the corner during our bedtime routine. I would tuck her into bed, read her a story, and just as I was about to turn off the light, she'd point to the far corner of the room and whisper, "The man's here, Mommy." I laughed it off at first, chalking it up to the vivid imagination of a toddler. Kids have imaginary friends, I told myself. But something about the way she said it, the way her eyes would focus on that shadowed corner, made my skin crawl. Every night, it was the same routine. "The man's here, Mommy," she would say, her little finger pointing toward the darkened corner. She didn't seem afraid, more so curious. I would smile, reassure her that there was no man, just shadows, and kiss her goodnight. One night, as I kissed her goodnight and walked out of her room, I kept thinking about the man in the corner, and the more I thought about it, the more uneasy I became. I checked in on her a few more times that night, walking around her room, standing by her bedside looking into corners to see if, perhaps, there was a trick of the moonlight from her blinds. Nothing. I saw nothing that could be remotely mistaken for a man. Finally, I went across the hall to my room. Around midnight, I heard Aaliyah's soft cries coming from her room. I jumped out of bed and rushed to her, my heart pounding in my chest. As I rushed through her doorway, I froze. There, in the corner of the room, half hidden in the shadows, was a figure. It was tall, unnaturally thin, its limbs too long, its face a pale, distorted mask of twisted flesh. Its eyes were hollow, empty voids that seemed to suck the light out of the room, and its mouth was stretched into a grotesque grin that made my stomach churn. It was real. The man in the corner was real. I gasped, my hand flying to my mouth as I took a step back, my eyes locked onto the thing in the corner. It didn't move, didn't acknowledge me, just stood there, staring at Aaliyah with those empty eyes. I ran to her bed, scooping her up in my arms. She clung to me, her tiny body trembling with fear, her face buried in my shoulder.
"He's here, Mommy."
She whimpered, her voice muffled against my shirt. "I know, baby. I know," I whispered, my voice shaking. I turned to leave the room, but as I did, the thing in the corner moved. It took a step forward, its long, bony fingers reaching out toward us, its grin widening, exposing rows of sharp, jagged teeth. I screamed, bolting out of the room. Aaliyah clutched tightly to my chest. I didn't stop running until we were in the living room. The door slammed shut behind us. For a moment, I stood there, panting, my heart racing, my mind reeling from what I had just seen. But as I looked down at my daughter, her tear-streaked face pressed against my chest, I knew I had to do something. With Aaliyah in my arms, I grabbed my phone and keys and ran outside. It was only when we were completely out of the house that I looked up, and my heart dropped. I locked eyes with that thing. It was watching us from Aaliyah's bedroom window. After what seemed like an eternity, it turned, walking back into the bedroom, leaving the window dark and empty. I called my brother, who was working a night shift at the hospital. He answered on the first ring, his voice filled with concern.
"What's wrong?"
"You need to come home. Now," I said, trying to keep the tremble out of my voice.
"What's going on?"
"I can't explain it over the phone. Just please, come home. Aaliyah and I, we're not safe here." He didn't question me further. We hung up and I stood in my front yard, thankful my brother moved in to help me after Jason passed away. The moment I thought about calling police, I dismissed it. There was no cop in their right might who'd believe me. Within 15 minutes, he was home, his face pale and drawn as he got out of his car.
"What happened?"
He demanded, his eyes scanning us and then the house for any sign of danger. "There's something in Aaliyah's room," I said in a low voice. "Something not human," my voice barely audible. He stared at me, disbelief and fear warring in his eyes. But he knew I was not the hysterical type and didn't question me. He just nodded and went to his trunk, pulling out his old baseball bat.
"Stay here with Aaliyah, I'll check it out."
"No!" I cried, grabbing his arm. "Don't go in there. You don't understand. This thing, it's not human." He just looked at me. "I called you so we could all leave together, get a room for the night, or stay at one of your buddies. Then tomorrow in the daylight we can come back. A group of us. We could come back and just pack what we need and leave." He looked at me, his expression softening. And for a moment, I saw the fear in his eyes too. But then he nodded, squeezing my hand.
"I'll be careful. Just stay here with Aaliyah."
He walked up to the house, opened the door, and started down the hallway, leaving the front door wide open so I can see. The bat clenched tightly in his hands. I didn't move, didn't breathe, my heart in my throat, as I watched him open Aaliyah's door from the hallway. For a long moment, there was silence. Just as I thought I must have imagined this whole thing, I heard it. A low, guttural sound that sent chills down my spine. Then, everything happened at once. My brother's eyes went wide for a split second as he was bringing the bat back for a swing, and in the next instant, it was as if he was snatched inside the room. But I never saw anything actually grab him. One moment he was ready to fight, and the next he was just in the room. I heard growling and a scream, bat hitting flesh, followed by the sound of something heavy crashing to the floor. I sprinted to the car and put Aaliyah inside, yelling that she stay inside until I come back. I turned and bolted to the house. "Tom!" I screamed, running through the hallway. But as I reached the doorway, I froze. The room was empty. The bed was overturned, the dresser smashed, but there was no sign of Tom, no sign of the thing in the corner, just the empty room, bathed in the dim glow of the nightlight. "Tom?" I whispered, my voice shaking. But there was no response, I backed away, my heart pounding, the realization slowly sinking in. The thing in the corner had taken him, and it was still out there, waiting, watching. I ran to the car, my hands trembling as I fumbled with the keys, desperate to get as far away from that house as possible. As I sped down the road, tears streaming down my face, I glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see the thing in the corner sitting in the back seat, its hollow eyes staring back at me. But there was nothing there, just the dark, empty road stretching out before us. I never went back to that house. I sold it as soon as I could. I told everyone interested in the house about the creature, and every one of them thought I was insane. But even now, years later, I still see it in my nightmares. The thing in the corner, its hollow eyes, its twisted grin. Sometimes it even looks like my brother, and I know deep down that it's still out there, waiting. And one day it will come for me too. The first time I saw the thing whispering into someone's ear, I thought I was going insane. But then I started seeing them everywhere, and no one would listen to me. I was on the subway, heading home after a day of visiting friends, when I first saw it. The train was packed, the air thick with the smell of sweat, and too many bodies crammed into too small a space. I was standing, holding onto the overhead rail, when I noticed a woman sitting across from me. She was young, maybe in her late 20s, with dark hair pulled back into a messy bun and earbuds in her ears. She was staring blankly ahead, lost in her own world when I saw it. A shadowy, twisted figure hunched over her, its mouth pressed against her ear, whispering something that made her eyes glaze over. The thing was almost invisible, its body like a shadow clinging to her, its face distorted and featureless, but its presence was palpable, a cold, suffocating weight in the air. I blinked, convinced that I was just tired, that my mind was playing tricks on me. But when I looked again, it was still there, whispering into her ear, its long, thin fingers brushing against her neck. Holy shit, I muttered under my breath, my heart pounding in my chest. I looked around, expecting someone else to react, to notice the thing hovering over the woman, but no one did. They just sat there, scrolling through their phones, reading their books, completely oblivious to the horror right in front of them. I wanted to say something, to shout, to warn her, but what the fuck could I say? Hey, there's a shadow whispering in your ear? I shook my head, trying to convince myself that it wasn't real, that I was just tired, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was horribly wrong. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I tried, I heard the whispering, a low, insidious sound that echoed in my mind, filling me with a sense of dread that I couldn't shake. I knew I needed to talk to someone, but who the hell would believe me? The next day, I saw it again. This time, it was following a man in a business suit. Its body hunched over, its mouth pressed against his ear, whispering something that made his steps falter, his face pale. The man shook his head, as if trying to clear his thoughts, but the thing just pressed closer, its whispering growing more frantic, more desperate. I wanted to scream, to shout, to rip the thing off of him, but I was frozen in place, my heart pounding in my chest. No one else seemed to notice. People just walked by, their faces blank, their eyes glazed over, completely unaware of the horror unfolding right in front of them. Fuck, I whispered, my voice trembling. I couldn't take it anymore. I left work early, my mind racing, my hands shaking as I tried to make sense of what I had seen. I called my sister, the only person I thought might believe me. But when I tried to explain, she just laughed it off.
"Come on, AC, you're just tired.
She said, her voice filled with concern.
You've been working too hard. You need to get some sleep."
No, you don't understand, I insisted, my voice trembling. These things, they're real. I can see them. They're whispering into people's ears, controlling them, doing something to them.
AC, listen to yourself. You're not making any sense. Please, just take a few days off, get some rest. You'll feel better, I promise.
I hung up the phone, frustration and fear bubbling up inside me. No one believed me. No one could see what I was seeing. I felt like I was going insane, but deep down, I knew it was real. I knew these things were out there, following people, whispering dark secrets into their ears, and no one else could see it. The sightings became more frequent. I saw the things everywhere, on the subway, in the grocery store, at the park. They were always the same, dark, twisted figures, featureless faces, hunched over people, whispering into their ears, controlling them, manipulating them. I tried to ignore them, tried to convince myself that it was all in my head, but it was impossible. The things were always there, always whispering. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't focus on anything except the next sighting, the next person who would fall victim to the whispering ones. One night, as I was walking home from the store, I saw it again. This time, it was following a young girl, maybe 12 or 13, her eyes wide and frightened as she walked down the empty street. The thing was hunched over her, its mouth pressed against her ear, whispering something that made her steps falter, her face pale.
"Hey! Get away from her!"
The girl turned, her eyes filled with fear, but the thing didn't let go. It clung to her, its whispering growing more frantic, more desperate, as if it were trying to drown out my voice.
"Get the fuck away from her!"
I screamed, grabbing the girl's arm and pulling her away. The thing let out a low, guttural hiss, its featureless face twisting into a grotesque grin, and then it was gone, disappearing into the shadows as if it had never been there. The girl stared at me, her eyes wide with fear and confusion.
What was that?"
Her voice trembling. "I don't know," I replied, my heart pounding in my chest. "But you're safe now." I walked her home, my mind racing with fear and confusion. The whispering ones were real, and they were everywhere, following people, whispering dark secrets into their ears, controlling them, and no one else could see them. No one but me? I tried telling the police, but they thought I was making it up for attention. My friends and family said I was just tired, stressed out, that I needed to get some rest. But I knew the truth. I knew the whispering ones were out there, watching, waiting, whispering their dark secrets into the ears of the unsuspecting.
What if I told you every urban legend you've ever heard was true? Every monster, every ghost, every dark tale whispered in the dead of night? I didn't believe it either, until I found myself living the nightmare. I was a skeptic, always had been. I grew up on horror movies, ghost stories, and the kind of bullshit urban legends you hear around campfires or from that one weird uncle who swears he saw Bigfoot once. But I never believed any of it. I was a man of logic, of science, and I was convinced that all those stories were just that. Stories. That is, until the night I learned the hard way that some things are more real than you can ever imagine. It started with a bet, like most stupid decisions do. My buddies and I were drinking one night, shooting the shit when the conversation turned to urban legends. The usual suspects came up. Bloody Mary, the hookman, that one about the babysitter who gets calls from inside the house. We laughed it off, talking about how dumb people must be to believe in that crap. That's when Jake, the loudmouth of the group, slapped down $100 on the table.
I'll bet you're too chicken to check out that old asylum on the edge of town. You know, the one where they say all those kids disappeared?
I snorted, rolling my eyes. That place is just a rundown building, Jake. There's nothing there but rats and mold.
Prove it.
He challenged, his eyes gleaming with mischief.
Go there tonight, spend an hour inside, and bring back something to prove you were there. If you do, the money's yours.
I should have told him to fuck off, should have just laughed it off and gone home. But the alcohol had me feeling bold, invincible even, and before I knew it, I'd agreed. We piled into my car, Jake in the passenger seat, and drove out to the asylum. It was a few miles out of town, surrounded by thick woods that made the road feel like it was leading us straight into the mouth of some dark, hungry beast. The moon was hidden behind thick clouds, and the headlights barely cut through the fog that clung to the trees like a shroud. The asylum was a hulking, dilapidated structure, its windows broken and boarded up, the walls covered in graffiti and vines. The gate hung open, creaking in the wind, and the whole place reeked of decay and abandonment.
Here we are.
Jake said with a grin, clapping me on the back.
Good luck, man. I'll be waiting right here.
Yeah, I muttered, grabbing a flashlight from the glove compartment. This'll be quick. I stepped out of the car, the cold night air biting at my skin, and made my way to the entrance. The door was barely hanging on its hinges, and it groaned as I pushed it open, the sound echoing through the empty halls. The inside was even worse than I expected. The floor was covered in debris, broken glass, crumbling plaster, and what looked like old, rotting medical equipment. The walls were lined with faded, peeling posters, warning about diseases that hadn't been relevant for decades. The smell was overwhelming, a mix of mold, urine, and something far worse, something that made my stomach churn. I walked deeper into the building, my footsteps echoing off the walls, the beam of my flashlight cutting through the darkness. I was supposed to be finding something to bring back, but the further I went, the more I realized I didn't want to touch anything in this place. I was about to turn back when I heard it, a faint, distant sound like the shuffling of feet or the rustling of fabric. I froze, my heart skipping a beat, my mind racing. There was no way anyone else was here. The place had been abandoned for years. "Hello?" I called out, my voice trembling slightly. "Is someone there?" No answer. Just silence. I shook my head, cursing myself for being so jumpy. It was probably just the wind, or maybe an animal that had gotten inside. But as I turned to leave, I heard it again, louder this time, closer. I spun around, the flashlight beam swinging wildly as I tried to pinpoint the source of the sound. That's when I saw it. A figure standing at the end of the hallway, just barely visible in the darkness.
"Who the fuck are you?"
I shouted, my voice echoing through the empty halls. The figure didn't move, didn't respond. It just stood there, its head tilted slightly as if it were watching me. A chill ran down my spine and I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. Something was wrong. Something was very fucking wrong. I took a step back, my mind screaming at me to get the hell out of there, but my legs felt like they were made of lead. Then, the figure moved. It was slow at first, a shuffling step that made my skin crawl. For a second I thought it was Jake fucking with me. But then it started to pick up speed, its movements jerky, unnatural, like a marionette being yanked by invisible strings. I turned and ran, my heart pounding in my chest, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I didn't know what the hell was happening, didn't care. I just knew I had to get out of there. But the thing was fast, faster than it had any right to be. I could hear it behind me, its footsteps echoing off the walls, getting closer and closer with each passing second. I didn't dare look back, didn't want to see whatever it was that was chasing me. I rounded a corner and saw the entrance up ahead, the door hanging open like a lifeline. I was almost there, almost free, when something cold and slimy wrapped around my ankle, yanking me off my feet. I hit the ground hard, the flashlight flying out of my hand and clattering to the floor, the beam flickering as it rolled away. I tried to kick free, but whatever had grabbed me wasn't letting go. I screamed, the sound raw and primal, filled with a terror I hadn't felt since I was a kid. I reached for the flashlight, desperate to get a better look at what was holding me, but before I could grab it, something heavy slammed into my back, knocking the wind out of me. I rolled over, gasping for breath, and that's when I saw it. It wasn't a person. Not anymore. It was twisted and deformed, its skin gray and mottled, its eyes sunken and empty. Its mouth was stretched into a grotesque grin, teeth sharp and jagged, its breath reeking of death and decay. It was as if time stopped for a second. I thought, is this a zombie? At the same time, I noticed the wet tentacle-like arms snaking out of the darkness. I lost my shit then. I'm strong and fast. I bucked and flailed. I managed to get myself free and bolted. I pumped my arms and legs to go faster. Faster, damn it, faster. It lunged at me, its claws digging into my flesh, its mouth opening wide as it went for my throat. I screamed again, the sound echoing off the walls, but there was no one to hear me, no one to help me. I don't know how I got away. The next thing I remember, I was stumbling out of the asylum, blood pouring from the wounds on my neck and chest, my vision blurry and my head spinning. Jake was waiting by the car, his face pale as he took in the sight of me.
What the fuck happened to you?
He demanded, his voice shaking. I couldn't answer. I couldn't even think. I just collapsed, my body trembling, my mind replaying the horror I had just lived through. He dragged me into the car, slamming the door shut as he started the engine. We sped away from the asylum, the tires screeching on the pavement, but I couldn't stop shaking, couldn't stop seeing that thing in my mind's eye.
What the hell happened in there?
Jake asked again, his voice frantic. I saw something, I whispered, my voice barely audible. Something that shouldn't exist. He didn't ask any more questions. He just drove, the car hurtling down the dark, empty road as we fled from the nightmare. I wish I could say that was the end of it, that I left that night behind and never looked back. But the truth is, you can't escape something like that. Not really. The nightmares followed me. I didn't escape that night. It let me go. Now I see it everywhere, it hides in the shadows, but I know it's there. And sometimes, when the night is quiet and the world feels just a little too empty, I can still feel its claws on my skin, still hear its breath on my neck, teeth in my throat. Sooner or later it will finish what it started with me. Trust me, monsters are real. We thought it was just an old well, a forgotten relic from a time long past. But when something started crawling out of it, we realized it was a fucking doorway to hell. It all started when my buddies and I decided to explore the abandoned farm at the edge of town. The place had been empty for years, left to rot after the old man who owned it disappeared under mysterious circumstances. The locals said he'd just up and left one day, but there were rumors, dark, twisted rumors, that he'd been hiding something on that land, something no one was supposed to find. But we were young, stupid, and bored, and the idea of exploring a creepy old farm sounded like the perfect way to kill time. We grabbed some beers, hopped in the truck, and made our way out there, laughing and joking about the bullshit ghost stories we'd heard growing up. The place was a fucking mess. The house was falling apart, the barn was half collapsed, and the fields were overgrown with weeds and brambles. But it was the well in the center of the property that caught our attention. It was old, ancient-looking, with stones worn smooth by time and covered in moss. The wooden cover had long since rotted away, leaving a gaping black hole that seemed to swallow the light.
Hey, check this out. Think there's anything down there?
Blake called, leaning over the edge of the well and peering down into the darkness. Probably just a bunch of dead animals, I said, taking a swig of my beer. Or maybe old man Higgins himself. Maybe he fell down there and broke his neck. We laughed, the idea of the old man rotting at the bottom of the well somehow funny in our drunken state. But then, something strange happened. A low, rumbling sound echoed up from the depths of the well, like a deep growl reverberating through the stones. We all froze, the laughter dying in our throats as we stared at the well, our eyes wide with confusion.
Did you hear that?
Yeah, I muttered, stepping closer to the well. What the fuck was that?
Maybe busted pipes? This place is real damn old.
Blake, you're an idiot. It's a well. It doesn't have pipes. We all started laughing and started to talk about other things. When we heard it again, this time it didn't just sound like a low rumbling. It sounded like a heavy exhale. No, that wasn't right. More like a growl. It was unlike anything I have ever heard before. We looked into the darkness, and just beyond my eyes' reach, I thought I saw movement. But the inky black depth of the well swallowed anything I thought I saw. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then it came again. The growl. And it was louder this time. We all took a step back, our fear mounting. Then, before we could react, something started to crawl out of the well. Its body was long and thin, like a serpent, but with legs, dozens of them, all covered in slick black scales that glistened in the fading sunlight. Its head was the worst part, though, if you could even call it a head. It was more like a mass of writhing tentacles, each one tipped with a sharp, needle-like appendage that dripped with a thick, black ichor.
Holy fucking shit, what the hell is that thing?
I don't know. I gasped, my mind racing as I tried to make sense of what I was seeing. But we need to get the fuck out of here. But the creature was fast, faster than anything that size had any right to be. It lunged at us, its tentacles whipping through the air, latching onto Blake's leg and dragging him to the ground.
Help me!
He screamed, his voice filled with pure, unbridled terror. We rushed forward, grabbing onto Blake's arms. I pulled with all my might, but the creature's grip was like iron. It was dragging him back toward the well, its tentacles wrapping around him, squeezing, crushing.
Get it off me! Get it off!
Blake shrieked, his voice breaking as the creature's tentacles tightened around his chest, the needle-like appendages piercing his skin. Blood started to seep from the wounds, dark and thick, staining the ground as the creature pulled him closer to the well. I could see the fear in Bake's eyes, the sheer, overwhelming terror as he realized what was happening. "I can't hold on!" I shouted, my hand slipping as the creature pulled him further away. At the same time, I saw Dave get thrown back by a huge tentacle before crashing hard onto the ground. But it was no use. The creature was too strong, its grip too tight. With one final bone-chilling scream, Blake was dragged into the well, the creature's body slithering down after him, disappearing into the darkness. We stood there, frozen in shock, our minds struggling to process what had just happened. Blake was gone, dragged into that ancient fucking nightmare well by a creature straight out of hell. "We need to leave," I whispered, my voice trembling. "We need to get out of here right fucking now." But Dave didn't move. He was still staring at the well, face pale, eyes wide with terror. I supposed I looked the same way. And then, to my horror, I saw something else crawling out of the well. Another creature, just like the first one, its slick black body writhing as it pulled itself up from the depths. "Run!" I screamed, turning and bolting toward the truck. I didn't look back, didn't stop to see what was following. I just ran, my heart pounding in my chest, my mind filled with images of Blake's terrified face as he was dragged into the well. We reached the truck, Dave fumbling with the keys as he tried to get the door open, hands shaking with fear. Finally, we managed to get inside, slamming the doors shut just as another creature lunged out of the darkness, its tentacles slapping against the windows, leaving streaks of black ichor. "Go, go, go!" I screamed, Dave turning the key in the ignition and slamming his foot on the gas. The tires squealed as the truck lurched forward, leaving the creatures behind in a cloud of dust. We didn't stop driving until we were miles away, my hands white-knuckled on the dashboard, my mind racing with fear and confusion. What the hell had just happened? What were those things? And how had they been trapped in that well for so long? Although I wanted to have hope, I knew deep down that Blake was gone, dragged into that ancient fucking nightmare well by creatures straight out of hell. I haven't gone back to that farm since, and I never will. But I can't stop thinking about it. Can't stop wondering what those things were, and how many more of them are still down there, waiting for someone else to stumble upon that cursed well. And I also know, deep down, that it's only a matter of time before they crawl out again.
Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed the stories in this creature compilation. I try to take inspiration from all things creepy or unsettling and cram it into these horror shorts. You'll see a mix of traditional horror molded with thrillers and infused with a bit of sci-fi. Sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't. Either way, I'd like to think you have put these on in the background of your work day or cleaning day, where you are then transported into another universe while still occupying ours in whatever way you are. I particularly like the thing in the nursery. There's something about a sinister being hidden in the dark corners of your home that gives me the creeps. I guess it has to do with growing up and being scared of dark rooms or hallways. Well, until we meet next time.